video is going to be about sensitive subjects for the psychologist and whoever is helping fix things, alleviate, therapeutically, whatever it could benefit, and in positive ways, healing. I'm not the professional, but I think this would be great just so that it's said. I've drawn most of these drawings, topics about the molestation that had happened with, one second. With my brother Frankie. Okay, so I made this video before, at least most of the topics discussion, but I wanted to talk more about how this person used to always be around all the time. This is the guy about Skived, the guy that used to live down the street. And this is not Miguel, because everybody knows what Miguel and Diana did. But specifically, this guy Skived. Now this guy Skived, if you thought Miguel was big, this guy was like 270. I want to say he was at least 270, because like I've seen what a guy weighs like 240. And I remember like Jesse, he was a boxer and he was pretty heavy set, and he weighed like 240 pounds, maybe a few pounds under, a few pounds over, and what that looked like. And I was taller than him, and he was about the same exact size as Miguel, maybe like 10 pounds lighter. If you thought this guy was big too, no, Skived weighed like 270, because he was my height, 5'11". He wouldn't, I don't think, reach 6 foot, but he was 5'11", my height. But this guy was big, like muscular big. Like he had big, broad shoulders. He had big. I remember him having bigger calves as well, bigger than Miguel, because he used to always wear shorts, pretty high shorts, like basketball, old school 1980s shorts, almost. And used to wear a knee brace and always wore muscle T-shirts. He never wore. I never really remember him. It was always kind of like in his workout, sort of like he was going to go to the gym or something, and he'd wear these muscle T-shirts that you see these bodybuilders wear. You ever see those, like those they call them wife beaters, not wife beaters, but they're like muscle shirts. That's what he always wore, and you could see his muscles. And this guy was big. This guy was huge, and I'm going to say he had at least weighed 270. He may have weighed even a little bit more during that. He, at all given times, he weighed 20 pounds easily over Miguel, because he was my height, but he was like, his calves were bigger, and he was just like bigger. He had meat on him, and he was like a bulk kind of bull looking. Not like a bull, but like bulk. He had like bulk muscle, and he had some definition. His calf muscles were pretty ripped, and I talk about this because for like the incident that happened with Frankie going inside his apartment, his house, when I was coming home one day from school and I was a kid. He opened the door very quickly, and it was almost kind of like shuffling Frankie out very fast, and Frankie was moving very fast. Like he opened the door, and I was just reached around the corner, just maybe 20 feet after the corner of Osceola, turning right to go down the street of Osceola, and then I saw him push the door open, and Frankie kind of scuffles very quickly, like trying to get himself together, like we can't, like it's a secret or hiding something. Like the body movement, just entirely, it was weird. And Frankie, I had never seen him make conversations with this guy, like long conversations. I was never with Frankie making long conversations. A lot of the times it was always like, oh, hey, how you doing? Oh, hey, how you doing, Skived? Or whatever. And I recall as a kid, when he did that, and Frankie never went into his house again after that. And he quickly went back into the house, not able for me to be able to make a look at his face or his body very fast. So he didn't wait to say like hello or hi to me. He just kind of let him out, like you're the one that comes in and out. And when I talked about that he gave Frankie some sort of candies, like strawberry candies. They used to make them. I think there were. It was either it was one of the two types of candy, a couple different types of candies that it was. It was either a mint androids, what are they called? Not androids. Andre the mountain mints that they make, chocolate and white on the inside, or it was the strawberry hard candy with like a little bit of. I think they used to have like a little bit of strawberry filling to them, a little bit. I know my dad's other aunt or sister used to, Nan and Joe used to give them to me when I was a kid, or when we went to their house just a number of times. And my mom knows who this is. So does Julian. So does Frankie. So I remember that, or it was Jolly Ranchers. It was one of those three candies. But I remember him immediately putting it into his mouth. Like, and he was just like, oh, like, and everything was so suspicious about it. Nothing was the usual Frankie. It wasn't the usual Frankie and how I remember Frankie. He doesn't behave this way. And when I saw him, I remember talking about, like, I remember smelling something, this sort of smell on him, and I think he had like foul smell breath. And it's, you know, I hate to be talking, I don't like to be going to it's disturbing. I don't know if he was giving him oral sex or he did penetrate him. Maybe it was something else I smelled. But when I was walking with Frankie, Frankie told me, and he said that, oh yeah, I go, what are you doing in there? I asked him, like, what are you doing in there? What's going on? How come you going in there? What? Oh, no, he just told me to come in. He said, yeah, you could just come on in. I wanted to show you some plants. And he said he went in his house, and he said there was a bunch of plants, and he said he had like a lot of organic stuff, like a bunch of plants. And I know that he used to smoke weed because he came over to my house only once or twice and smoked weed once with my dad. I don't think it was on our front house, at our house, but he did have them come over once or twice. And my mom hated that his wife, it didn't like him. Every time his wife would come over, like she came over a couple of times by herself, and she was, my mother was like, oh no, dice que no estoy aquí, and that means don't tell him I'm not here, tell him I'm not here. That's what my mother used to do, and I was like, what's going on? And my mother never was giving me explanations, but I remember this woman was profoundly wanting to control my mother, and she was almost forcing my mother. And I mean, this woman was behaving, and when she came over to our house many years ago, this is before the incident with Frankie coming out of Skivel's house. It was the second house to the corner on the left side, going down the street to Osceola, right before you get to the White House, or what looks like the white compound next to Good Elementary. And this woman was like if you ever see somebody so paranoid trying to get away with something, he needs to control you because they need you to get you to say something in the way that they want, or to see how they can control. This is exactly how this woman was behaving. And she brought over a big bucket of margaritas, and they started making margaritas, and she was like, oh, yo no tomo, no, it's good for you. And she doesn't know my mother. You got to keep in mind, my mother's not keeping friends with anybody. They're not friends of ours. They don't come over all the time. But my mother's in the kitchen with this guy, and Skiva is talking to this guy, to my dad, right? And they're sitting on the couch, and I'm just looking at them, and then I go over to the kitchen, and then I look over there in the kitchen, and then I look, and they make the margaritas, and this woman was like, oh no, look, where's your spoon? Oh, okay. And she was just like this is my house. Like, this is my house, I do what I want. Like, that's how she was portraying. It wasn't respective in a way, and I didn't understand why my mother was like, oh, no. Like, you could tell my mother was, stop controlling me. And she was like, and I remember this, because I was standing in the doorway of my room in the kitchen. And so, whatever this woman was, it was like very, like this guy had probably told this person, I don't know if this woman, I'm pretty sure she was a woman. She was a real woman. I don't know, she could have been a transgender. I highly doubt she was a transgender. I think she was an authentic woman. Could have been. I don't know. You have to do your research. And I look at Ski Bed, and he's just sitting in the corner like just talking to me, and I'm kind of nervous. Anytime somebody was really big next to my dad, it always made me nervous because I knew they could kick his ass. That was always something that kind of made me nervous because the guys are so big. Sometimes my dad was all old and stuff, but I loved my dad. I was always fear of my dad. That's something how I grew up in, is always fearing that somebody could harm my dad. But I always trusted my dad that he had the brains, and he did. And to get out of us in the situations, they stayed at our house for me for a couple of hours, 2-3 hours. I would say no more than 4 hours. And so my mother, I know that she drank like a couple sips. Like, oh no, like she was avoiding. Like she drank like a little bit. Like she drank and she's like, oh no, stop, I'm just. Like she was being forced. Like the way I'm looking at her, she goes like, "Oh yeah, I'm okay. I'm drinking." See, And the lady was looking at her. She was shorter than my mother, and she goes, "Oh yeah, see, I'm getting you to do what you want, like what you're supposed to be doing." Like, and this woman was like very frantic, like very, and she was making herself at home. Like, this is my house. It was very much like that, but not in a way that was like necessarily mean and aggressive. It was like passive aggressive sort of, but it was like, I can get you to do what I wanted to do because you're stupid, you're Mexican, you're old, and you're vulnerable. And it was like to control. And I remember her sort of looking over at Esquivel, and I don't know what this communication was. You're gonna have to, I don't know. She could have been a lesbian. I don't remember if my mother told me she was a lesbian or something, but I just know that my mother, whenever they left, they came to our house a couple times, I think, and my mother would look, or I said, God, you're not gonna give me, I don't care. She would always tell me this when I was a kid. Look at me, and she'd like, so she would express herself like this. She only came to our house like 2 or 3 times by herself, out knocking on the door. She never went in our house at all, other than that one time that I remember her coming over. There could have been another time, Esquivel, I wasn't there. I think there might have been when I was there, but they didn't drink. I don't know if they were trying to secure the fact that Miguel had done the rapings because everyone knew about it. And they did this because they wanted to find out what my dad knew. They wanted to find out what my mother knew and how they behaved. So when they want to rape a child, they have to make sure who's vulnerable and take a look and see how the mother and father behave. And that's what they're doing. Because if you look vulnerable, they take advantage of you. And that's the first thing they want to do. And after conversating quite a number of times, they assumed my dad either didn't know or didn't care. And I'm pretty sure they believed that he didn't know because there was too many people around my father to size up that you're raping his son. So, Frankie. So, this Esquivel, I never ever one time, Frankie stayed in his room. He never, when I was in the house, when Esquivel and they came over, this is before the incident of Frankie going into the the house. This was before that incident. This was before that incident, for sure. So Frankie, I think, is in 6th grade. I think at this point he's in 6th grade. I want to say 5th or 6th grade, and he seemed very witted when he came out of the house. But this is like a year. This is like a year or maybe 2 before this happened. This is like maybe a year. I wouldn't say a year, I would say about 2 years. 2 years before that. And I was very young. I was about 8 years old. I'm going to say I was about 8 years old. 8 or anywhere from 7, I wasn't 7 years, I was about 8 years old. 8 to 9 years old. And they talked, they were smoking cigarettes. I think I remember him smoking a cigar. You can look up to see if he smoked up cigars. But they were talking, and this guy was just like, oh, and he was talking, and he was in his normal workout outfit or whatever he always wore. And they seemed in great company. Like, my dad was like, oh, yeah, and like this guy seemed to be sizing my father up in a way that my father wasn't someone who liked a bunch of friends. He didn't have friends liking friends all the time coming over. He liked having talks and here and there, but he didn't like friends coming over the house. when it came to other strangers around his kids and family. He just, unless they were family, like, my Uncle Beto or something like that. But other than that, he just wasn't like that. And so, with 2 years go by, and this guy had to have known, because the way that woman was behaving, and I didn't even know where this guy, how did this guy way down the street, my dad's never knew this guy. I don't remember if you could look this up. I think my father, I don't know how he met him or knew him, because we didn't have random people up and down the streets in the neighborhood come to our house just like that. So sometimes I have to go into elaborations, because people don't understand that the details of this, of the events that I'm talking about, and I go through in my head faster than I can talk. So in this particular situation, it was like 2 years prior to 2 years after that incident. It was whenever I saw Frankie come out of that room. By this time, I think my father was heavily drinking. My father was already pretty heavily drinking. They didn't come over at all to our house ever. When he did that, he hadn't been to our house in like a year at all. He used to come over occasionally. There was probably showed up. Frankie could tell you this, my mom could tell you this, or Julian could tell you this as well. And so when I saw him coming out of that house, he used to always say hi, like, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And this guy was sizing us up. I mean, now that I think about that, Frankie remember got raped by Miguel, and everyone knew about it. This guy was sizing me up to see if either I was gay, or if I had been raped or molested, or how I was behaving toward the situation, because he was always walking up and down the neighborhood sizing everything up. And I was about, after the incident of him coming out of the house, he never again, he's always almost kind of kept his head down, or he kept his head down, and he didn't, he kind of wanted to brush away, like play basketball, like just pretend he didn't hear me, or just kind of brush everything, just don't worry about it, like sort of attitude. And this is why I get the impressions that Frankie was raped or molested in the house, because he knows better to put a 12-year-old kid in your house. And the way that Frankie, it looked like he kind of shuffled or pushed Frankie. Not, because I didn't see him push his hand. Frankie scuffled it quickly, kind of like he pushed Frankie out of the house, or not pushed him, but like, "Oh, hey," and he turned around very quickly, like, "Oh, hey, okay, all right." And the conversation as he's walking out of the house did not seem normal. Like, it did not look normal. It didn't "Oh, hey, how's it going? Oh, okay." Like, it was very quick. "Okay, oh," and he was kind of like that sort of anticipation or something. So, for the next several years, for the next year or so, I always looked at this guy as suspicious, because I didn't know who he was, and I just thought he was Quebec. It wasn't until the incident I saw him when Frankie was in 6th grade that I ended up always wondering, and I'd always look at him like, "Oh," and he never asked me if I wanted to go to his house. And I remember asking Frankie, I was like, "What are you doing?" He's like, oh, next time you go in there, let me know so I can take a look, because Frankie sounded very enthusiastic when he said that there was a bunch of plants. He said that he's like, "Oh, it's really cool." He had plants and waterfalls and gardens all over in his house, all over. It's like a forest or something. Or he said there's a bunch of plants and there's like a waterfall or something like that. And that's how he behaved toward that situation. So I was always like, "Oh wow, he had I guess an aqua, room area, or in this entire house." But Frankie was like, "Oh, that's really cool." But it was, do not understand how Frankie, this guy did not know Frankie very well. Frankie didn't know him. I was around Frankie all the time. You got to understand that everywhere he goes, I go. I'm very nosy to find out what's going on in his life. It's just very constant this way. When he leaves his room, when he's somewhere, where did Frankie go? Where did Frankie go? "Hey, Dad, where's Frank? Oh, hey, Frankie, Mickey's here. Oh, hey, Frank." It was just all like that all the time growing up. If he went somewhere, Funtime Pizza, or I knew about it. I mean, there was a schedule list. I knew about it. and I was always wanting to go with him because he could go, you know, he didn't go out very much, but occasionally went out with, you know, a friend down here. He had no friends. He had no friends, not one friend that ever came over other than Miguel. There's a couple of kids that showed up to our house when we were kids. Chris Martinez showed up once, wanted to talk to Frankie, but that was it. He showed up like once or twice, and Frankie just didn't really care for it at the time, because I remember I said, "Who's that kid?" It's like, "Oh, he's in my school." He's like, "That guy's kind of weird. I don't know," and I don't know what the situation is. But I remember they were wanting to hang out, and they hung out a couple times or whatever in the front porch. Frankie never walked off the house to his house or anything like that. They just talked in the front yard, and Frankie would just always hit home bay in our house where we're supposed to be. And I say this because, I highly believe that for several years after that incident, it was probably like for 3 years before I never saw this guy again. I don't know if he died, I don't know if he had a heart attack. Never saw him in his house very much. He stayed hidden away. But I want to say for about 3 years, 2 years, he would always, like, he was walking all the time when we were like after school, a couple of hours after school, he'd get his basketball and he'd start dribbling and go play shoot hoops at Good Elementary. And at Good Elementary, you could shoot hoops on the court and everyone can see you. It's an open parking lot across the street. It's an open parking lot with a church, and he'd shoot hoops. And when you would watch him shoot hoops, for a big guy, like for a big, large, muscular, heavy-set guy, he could move. He was a big, set, heavy guy, and you could see how well he could move his heavy body very well, like athletically very well. Like, this guy was in shape, and he was like 60. He was like in his mid-50s to like late 50s, maybe early 60s, but I want to say he's like in his mid-50s. And he always wore his glasses, his dark circle glasses, which I never saw him without them. I don't think I ever saw him, maybe once or twice, but he always had these glasses on, these dark circle glasses, like he was some, just kind of, I don't know what those glasses represent, but you always saw them with him. It was weird. I guess he always wore shaded glasses. So like I said, every time I used to walk by him, and I never knew why, and I always look at him, always thinking about an incident, but I never said anything. And I said, "Oh, hey, how's it going?" And he'd look at me first 3 or 4 times and say, "Oh, how's it going?" Like, kind of after that incident, he shrugged me off. 4 or 5 months later, he's sizing everything up. It started coming to our house. This is to talk to my dad on the front porch, and my dad just started shrugging him off. Talking on the porch for 20 minutes, 15, and my dad was not having it. He didn't want to talk to him. He didn't hate him. I just did not want to socialize with people. Just didn't care. And he did smoke weed once with my father. He did smoke, because my dad told me that was the first time he smoked weed with him, and it was around the time that him and his wife was trying to get my mom drunk. Or his wife was trying to get my mom drink margaritas, and she drank like a couple sips of the margarita, but she brought a bucket of margarita mix. So anyway, my father committed suicide when I was 12. I'm in 6th grade. I'm 12 years old, but right before my father committed suicide and right after was around the time that he showed up. My dad was in the front portion. I want to say this is the area he showed up like once or twice and knew that my dad had something bad had happened. But prior to that, a little bit after that incident, I remember him showing up and he said, "Oh, this one's your kid too?" He goes, "Yeah, it's my son too." And it was Julian. And he remember him going, and he goes like this, like, "You got another kid, this one too?" And my brother said, yeah, that one too, yeah. And my dad was on the front porch, always smoking cigarettes. And, my dad never went on walks, went to his house ever. But for several years, once my dad went to the nursing home for the first year, he showed up walking, knocking on our door a couple of times. And my mother every time would tell me to answer the door and tell me, oh, you said Masaki, and said, oh no, my mom's not here right now, she's not here. She'd always tell me to tell this guy to get away, or not get away, but tell him he's not here. And he knew, he got the message. He stopped showing up like after 2 or 3 times. He didn't show up ever again. But for the period of time that Frankie walked out of the house to a year after my dad had, because he went back to our house after committing suicide, repaired his brain a little bit, stayed at the house for about 3 months, and then got taken to the nursing home. For that period of time before my dad got into the nursing home and I saw Frankie, it was always very suspicious. And the last 2 years that I saw this guy, from the age of about 11 to 12, I saw this guy. He showed up and walking up and down the streets all the time, and I remember him shooting hoops, and he shot hoops, and he quit, like he shoot hoops at the top right there where I remember we keep the crucifix, and then he looked over at my mother because he saw us driving like this, and he was shooting hoops way over here, and my mother said, oh, and I would be in the car with my mom, and he would shoot hoops like he was trying to signal something. Like he was trying to like shoot hoops and then quickly look right at my mom like aggressively, and then he'd shoot hoops and then he'd look at my mother at us driving by. So his focus was very much on that. So this is why I believe this guy had touched very much or raped Frankie. I wasn't confirmed because I wasn't in the room, but the smells, the behavior, everything 100% indicated this. So in this particular type of situation, the last 4 times, 5 times I saw this guy, and it was very frequent space that I saw him several times. I saw him all the time when I'd be getting out of school, showing up late. I used to stay in 4th grade. I had to stay late 30 minutes after school every single day because I got into a fight with a kid. I think it was Richard Murphy. I think it was Richard Murphy or Richard Greenway. And Richard would tell you this, and I got in trouble with them, and then they looked at my grades, and then once they looked at my grades, they said that I was doing really bad, and then they flipped the story. And this is makes me remind me to say this story. This is around the time my dad shows up to school, and they completely flipped the story from me getting into a fight to me making bad grades, and then punished me to stay 30 minutes late after school every day to stay with Miss Lowry. Miss Lowry was like one of my top favorite teachers, probably the favorite top teacher. And she helped me educationally beautifully. She helped me with my school, just helped me so much. She helped me get almost a straight A student when I was in 5th grade. She showed me how to do a lot of the language, reading, writing, how to write, how to do math, and she was a brilliant teacher, brilliant. And I used to I hated it at first, but I had to stay 30 minutes or an hour. I think it was an hour because school ended at 3 o'clock and then I had to leave at 4. So I left at 4 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday, for the last 6 months of the year, where all the kids got to go home. So when I got into 5th grade, I was making straight A's. I was nearly making straight A's in school. I'm not even joking. This is 5th grade. It's all of my years of school is the only time I almost made straight A's. And everything was very easy to me. It was very simple, very easy to me. So when this happened, when this whole particular situation happened, they tried to flip the story, and it's because the entire school knew about the rapes that had happened, and my dad always talked about my mom and other people, and it's me. He goes, I hate that principal. They try to flip. She changed the story. I came here to talk about that this guy touched my son, and because he shook me when I was a kid. And Mr. Bassi, Jeremy knows about this. Richard Murphy was in this class. Chris Kemp, Jonathan Toby, Garrett, Dallas Patterson. Dallas Patterson saw me cry. He actually lives at that Nick Carrera's dad's house. He used to live there. He actually saw me crying. He was like 2 desks away from me, and he felt really bad for me. And he saw me in the middle of class crying, like balling up, and not crying like crying like you would your mother, like so scared, and just kind of keeping my head down and trying to hold in everything. And the entire classroom stayed quiet. The entire classroom. You can ask all these kids. And I remember Dallas Patterson looking at me. You can ask Dallas Patterson this. I talked to him recently. And he looked over at me and he goes, hey, you okay? And you got to keep in mind, when you're a kid, we don't do this as little kids to each other, like all empathetic. We're all kind of be tough little kids. And he looked at me and goes, hey, man. And he looked at me and we got in the line after me crying. But before I get to that, I remember him I looked over and I could because I was sort of in the front of the class. I was right in the middle, but like one row before. It was like 5 rows and I was like dead in the center in class, like maybe 1 row up. And I was like, just like this. And I was like fucking shook and scared, like crying. And I was like the toughest kid in the class. People knew I wasn't scared to throw a punch. And I was like athletic, played soccer, and I was very athletic with all the kids, playing football and soccer, tetherball, wall ball. And I remember him, you can ask him, and he's like, and we got up after, and the teacher told me to go and cleaned up. Someone saw me crying in the bathroom, and I was just crying, and some other kid came in there with thick Coke bottle glasses, and he was like the most ruthless bully ever. And I remember this, and he comes in and he felt empathetic. I couldn't believe. I was in total shock because the tough kid. You cry in front of the tough kid. This kid, like, he was a white kid. He looked like a scientist, but he wasn't the biggest bully. This guy was willing to fight anybody. He was like a fighter. But I remember him totally feel empathetic for me, like, hey man, what's wrong? And I didn't even know this kid, and he saw me crying, like really, like not crying, but like bloodshot, like red face, just crying, like I was just crying. Anyway, I go back to after the teacher saw all the teachers, Jessica Swanee. I was in the middle of class, and everybody got quiet. The whole classroom was quiet. Anyway, so I know I drifted off the story. 4th grade, go to the principal's office, and this is where the incident happened. Well, around that time as well, this is where people start putting pressure because they know about the rapes, who's coming in and out. So, I think Miss Lowry, Miss Wahlberg, and Miss Berger, they were all like investigating. They were figuring out who was targeting us, some of us. And Miss Lowry was like a hero. She was a really pretty big hero. You don't understand that she really cared about me. She genuinely cared about me. Like even in relationships, she was almost came like a mother figure a little bit. I was very close to one of my the closest probably teacher I had all through grade school. And anyway, we get to I'm walking over to school, and I see this guy all the time in 4th grade. So, because I have to come home late, and he waits for the kids to leave and shoot hoops about 2 hours after, to about 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock sometimes. Sun's going down and shoots hoops. And this guy was big. I used to watch him a couple of times driving by in the car or riding my bicycle in up and down the streets with other kids or by myself. And I would watch him shoot hoops, and he could move very well. Like, and he'd throw up his big body, and he was like 270, maybe 275, 285. This guy was, I estimate 275 at least. 270 at least. Because he was bigger than Miguel, taller. Now keep in mind that this is what I wanted to share. For many years after that incident, I didn't know, because I didn't know what to suspect, because I never saw nothing bad. I just didn't know why his wife was like behaving like that, because he was having a good conversation that looked like with my dad. That lady never showed up again. He always showed up by himself. Now, and he saw my dad after the suicide, he was recovering, and he just was sort of lost sitting on the front porch. This guy was, and he didn't came over to the house again. I think that's one of the reasons it shook him up, or whatever the reason. I don't know what this guy was a predator in. So But I say this because he didn't want to ever say hi to me after that, or keep communication with me after that. He didn't have a repetitive behavior that was like sort of like, oh, you just the guy just down the street. Oh, it's just, it wasn't that. It was like something else was going on. Frankie, when I walked home from school after that incident, and I was walking with Frankie, he'd look at Frankie a couple of times and maybe look at him. I don't know if he was giving serious looks, but it wasn't like, oh, hey, how's it going? Hugs, shaking hands, none of that. It was very passive. He looked directly at my brother, like pretty serious, pretty kind of like he's meaning something, and just walked by with holding his basketball or dribbling a basketball. And he'd go, oh, how's it going? So it was very just like this, and you were just in his house. That's why I say that. So that it's extremely likely that everything indicates this. So I could be wrong. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he did have a cool garden. Maybe he did, didn't do, and he was. But the reason I say he knew about the sexual molestation is that there was more than one day that I saw him. He's leaving our house. He's walking down the streets. Once he gets to Miguel's house, he looks over and he stops, and he's just looking over at that house. And I think once he walked by and he looked at Miguel, and I think, this is what I want to say about this story about Esquivel, making this guy would make him number 11, is he walked by Miguel and never said hello. He wasn't ever like communicating, go to his house and talk to him. I think, in my opinion, I could be way off and unprofessional, what he did is that he was trying to put the sexual rape toward him when he got some of Frankie, and he raped Frankie a little bit, so that because everyone knew he did it, and he wants to make himself look like a hero. He wants himself to look like, oh, like I'm just making sure that big boy here is taking care of, Frankie, or I heard something about you. So he walks by and he says this. Now, whoever could look this up, whoever could find out, Frankie, Julian can tell you this, because Julian, this guy showed up several times, and Julian told me he answered the door and said, oh, my mom's not here, or whatever. And I told Julian knew this. Hey, if Esquivel comes over, let me know. Hey, does Esquivel come over? Hey. And I tell Julian when I was in the house, hey, does Esquivel come over? No, yeah, he came over a bit, but no, he just came and left. And so I would always check to see who was, you're okay? So I wanted to say this because Julian's always in front of the TV, laying on the ground, a little special spot with his blanket. So I wanted to say this because I think it's very important. Julian is going to be able to tell you any other suspicious behavior. Julian's going to be able to tell you some of the information because Julian was fully aware of what this guy was coming over and did. He actually was playing on the front porch a number of times when he came over. He tried to talk to my mother several times. But my mother never wanted conversation with him ever. Like she was just, even whenever he knocked on the door and he was like, oh hey, he like tried to drag my mother out of the house and was like, let me talk to you, let me get some engaged with you. So that's what he was doing. So I thought it was important for me to say something about this because it's absolutely important. It's absolutely important because I don't know if Frankie got raped. This guy was always deterred away from me because I remember him, I'm not kidding you, this one time I was walking with Frankie and he looked directly at Frankie and he walked exactly where I saw Barack Obama, but he looked at Frankie, not me. And he just looked at him kind of serious and just kind of looked away and he was, oh, he was going, like he was hiding something. It was almost like he was hiding something about something had gone. Frankie did not indicate, and I was like, oh, it's just Esquivel, yeah, it's Esquivel, He was behaving like that. This is the same behavior that Frankie sort of is very close to how he behaves whenever he's getting raped at the bar. Or he seems to, the behavior, oh, this is just normal life. We can rape little kids when we want. Just anal and get some, dick, suck our dick and get fucked, just normal. Because this is happening so frequently. By this point, Frankie is being trained and accepted, but my mother has no choice. You don't understand that my mother's being terrorized and threatened with physical threat, physical size and intimidation and I own you because I own your brain and I have the money. You're vulnerable. I could take whatever I want and use anything around you what I want. This is the state of mind. This is what my mom had to do with their little kid. So by this time, everyone knows about Michael Jackson, and the gay community, the police department knows about me. They're not doing anything. No, they're just keeping us safe. They don't want to send anybody. The police officers, they just want to cover it up. They want to cover up the rape. They want to go about their business, and just this one got off the hook. That's how they behave, because they know who Ken Cooper is, the police officer. And so anyway, so I think it's important for me to talk about this sexual molestation, because there's 10 confirmed rapes Frankie got raped by. Any other ones that I never saw or ever heard of? Very likely. I'll never know unless Frankie spilled all the beans to say it. Tell me every person that ever raped you. The other person that I want to say is there was 2 other ones I talked about that I was a part of that I don't know if they actually did. One was Bill at Ed's joint. I talked about when my dad got into a physical fight, but I talked about this guy that looks exactly like Ken Cooper. He was the actual owner. Chris Martinez used to take his dad and mom, and him, Joni, used to go there, and I saw them. And his dad, Chris Martinez's dad, knows that this guy raped Frankie. He does, because I drew pictures of this. And so anyway, we walk. I talked about that we go to Ed's joint, and when we go to Ed's joint, Frankie got raped by Bill, the guy, and I drew pictures and all this and explained the videos. But the guy Ed is at the very end, at the very end of the barber on the other side. He usually dealt with most of the cash. This guy was the owner. His name was Ed. He was the owner, and he was bleached blonde, white haired, Santa Claus looking guy, chubby, fat, like 265 pounds. He was over 250 pounds. This guy was chubby and old, and like a country hog looking build. And this is when I talk about that he came in, and this is when he told, yeah, go get you some, like go Bill or whatever. And this is when he raped. I don't remember him strapping his belt, or he came in very quickly and he was, yeah, and he goes like, go get you some, like, and I don't know if he did. I just knew, like, Frankie was in the bathroom. I don't know what he did, and then he went back there, and then that's when I talk about that Frankie was gone for a long time, and then I had to wait till Ed disappeared, or I don't know where he went or what the situation was, but I go back there, and that's when I heard Frankie, and this is the whole incident. But in this particular discussion that I talk about, I don't know if this guy did. I know Bill did, but I don't know if this guy did. I don't know if he did something, because he was in there like just taking turns on him. So I think it's important for me to talk about, those are the 2 guys, Esquivel and the guy that worked at Ed's joint. Those are the 2 guys. I don't know if they did. Highly likely, 100%, that, at least I think that Esquivel did. I could be wrong, about that, but I wasn't there to actually physically see it. So those are the 2 guys. That makes it total. If Ed himself, who owned that barbershop, actually did, then that makes it, and Steve Ed did, that makes it confirmed 12 men that raped Frankie from the age that I was born, the minute that I came into the world, that able to walk and run and talk and save and do anything, to Frankie was 14 years old. 12 or 13 years old. Frankie, the last time Frankie got raped, he was like 12 or 13 years old, I'm going to say. He was like 13 to 14, latest 4. I'm going to say he was like 13 years old. And it's very important for me to say this, because I haven't ever released that detailed information to give why I accuse this guy, why I think. So, Skived, that makes it confirmed. There was 12 people that I helped deter Frankie. Skived was after Frankie. I remember him walking by, he looked directly at Frankie, and he kept his head down away from me. It was weird. I'm telling you, he looked direct, and Frankie looked at him, and I saw him, I could see, because he was walking by, and I looked over at Frankie, how he was looking at him, and I remember Frankie looking at him like, like it was like a love connection or like a connection or something. It was a connection. It was a connection without a doubt. You think what you want. You have to talk to Frankie, and if anyone else saw or spilled the beans. So, you know, in this particular situation, Mikayla and this guy, that would make it 12. Did I deter this Ed? Yeah, because I was such a troublemaker to avoid people touching Frankie and doing these things that you don't understand how much I actually did. You don't understand. I don't consider myself a hero. I more consider Frankie's guardian throughout life, because there was no one else that was going to stop these people. You have no idea the risk, poison, and things that people did to me in my life as a kid. As I kept going through life, because Frankie kept it a secret how they were threatening my mother and conditioning, and my father being old the way his character was. He just didn't know and couldn't prevent. I saw my dad get into a full fist fight with this Bill, and he had blood and he was breathing, and full fist fight. So you want to touch my son? Come here, motherfucker. You know, like, forgive me, Lord, but that's what he did. I'm trying not to curse. It's a sin. Trying to talk better, not to use bad words anymore. So that's what happens. Okay, so if you want to consider the 12th guy that I was there part of after Bill, or he knew that I was a threat, I deterred them from just having full playboy with it, Frankie, which would have been worse. And I say that I think it's important. That makes it 12 confirmed people raped. 12, some of which I was a part of. Now, I got raped in Mexico. I got raped with my uncle, but I was fighting to tell my parents, and I told. The only time is when I was in Mexico, where I basically couldn't do anything. And when we were in Mexico, I couldn't do anything. I remember just like going to my mother, and we were crying, and I was so young. I was 5 years old, you know. And by this time, I remember my dad, like, because I had to perform oral sex, and I don't think he penetrated me or couldn't, because my body was too small, and he was doing sexual acts, like sort of playing like, oh, I got a big one or whatever. He goes, oh, he was like we were desserts, we were candy to him. And that's how he, Jacobo or Hayeye or whatever, he's the guy that came to our house and built the patios in the backyard, and built the flower beds made out of brick, like he was building a tombstone in front of our house. He built those. I was the guy that did it. Also, he did rape me in my house. I remember him penetrating me very quickly, and then I might be going to my dad's room and saying, when's that guy going to leave? But I didn't tell my dad was raped. I don't know if he smelled something on my hands, or he smelled, or something like that. But anyway, I think it's important, because when this happens, you know, when we were in Mexico, I talked about this story already, but that was pretty much, I didn't really consider anything other than I remember fighting for my brother Frankie, and I remember crying with him. I remember, like, let's tell Mom, no, don't tell Mom. And then this is whenever I was just exposing truth, like my behavior. Frankie was so covering up about this situation, because my dad was trying to protect me when I was a little kid, and he knew the guy touched me some way. And I remember getting near my dad for protection. He was kind of sheltering me. He squatted down, and he was kind of like sheltering me, kind of like you hold your son, like trying to protect him, you know. And he was just kind of sizing this guy's up, and he did this to me because he didn't know he had done this to Frankie. And it was the old man that hung himself in the backyard, and then Jacobo, or or whatever, my mom's uncle. So anyway, that I don't know if you want to count if I did anything, but I was a part entirely. My mother knew. My mother got raped. That's how Julian got pregnant, because his biological dad is from Mexico. Because my mother got raped, and this is where my dad was like, we gotta go, we gotta leave. So anyway, that's what happens. And I think it's important for me to talk about that these 12 guys did this to Frankie. 10 confirmed. If you get these 2 guys and you say that they did, you know, whoever knows can do the research, that's 12. Also want to talk about the incident that happened when Frankie got raped at the Leach's house, my dad's sister, who owned a pool. I talked about this guy used to wear OU University, Oklahoma University, college degree, business degree, and I was told that this guy, he looked kind of Native American Indian, but he was an Indian, and he kind of looked kind of dark complected, like Native American Indian, but pretty good shape, healthy for a 50-year-old man. He was in his 50s. And I want to say he was either a husband or close friends with the Elijah. And I talked about, we went to the house and I got poisoned. I was foaming from the mouth, horrifically fell on the ground, and I was just crying by myself for like 3 hours. They left me there, and this woman took me, and because she knew, Leacha knew she had just raped, that other guy had raped Frankie. And they were sitting, and this guy, I'm not kidding you, when he was in the living room, I think I talked about this, when me and Frankie, I'm about 9 years old, still playing soccer during soccer season. Maybe not older than 10. I wasn't older than 10. I was 9 years old because, yeah, Frankie's about 12 to 13 years old. And we walk into the house and I talked about my mother tastes the and she looks over at this guy like, because I told him my stomach was hurting. I said, "Mom, my stomach's hurting." And she goes, let me taste this. And there was no indication that I was already sick. My mother already seemed to know that this woman was going to do something bad or poison me. That's why she wanted to taste the food. This woman was berserk crazy. But anyway, when we got there, like, this is like a month or two prior after Frankie got raped at that house, and I talked about it. When we got to that house and we first walked in, my mom, Frankie, and me walked in together, and this is over by the Catholic Church, Immaculate, where Michael, Sarah, and Robert went to church and went to school and graduated. This guy was waiting like this. Like, he was like it was Bon Appetit. Take whatever you want. Just take whatever you want. And he was standing like this, like he wasn't talking his lips or licking them, but he was just like he was hungry. Like he was like, he's ready. This bull's ready to get him some sex. So that's the way that he was looking. And then he looks at me, and then he looks at Frankie, and he looks at my mother, and he's like, and my mother, I remember she goes, "No, this is my son." But you got to understand that my mother's behavior is so erratically submissive to anybody that orders her. It's very little protective, but it's my baby, it's my son. It's kind of this behavior. So I think it's important for me to say something. So, anyway, I already talked about this. Frankie was in the bathroom saying he was putting some cabinets or something inside he was putting like a cabinet inside the bathroom. He said he was getting Band-Aids or something, and they wouldn't open the door. And he said, "Go away, Hector." And this guy was penetrating or having sex with Frankie. Well, this is what I want to talk about. When we get into the poison incident was like a couple of months after this guy had touched Frankie. And I talked about that Frankie's eyes were red. They were putting marshmallows or chlorine inside the pool, and he was putting the little floater deal inside the pool to disinfect. And Frankie was kind of red eyes. And I talked about this video so many times, or in this other video, all the details. But this is what I did want to say very clear about my mother and how they have control over her. When we got into the car, this is not to persecute my mother. I'm not trying to make her look like an evil person. I'm not trying to make her look like she is a murderer. She's a rapist, foolish. To just forget, I'm going to throw that kid away. That's not what I'm doing with this. We get into the car, and I asked Frankie. He goes, "Yeah, Mom, get up. I saw Frankie. Frankie, what were you doing in there?" And Frankie, my mother knew he got raped. Looking at my mother, she knew. Even if he didn't, the trauma that my mother's behaving indicated that this woman was trying to cover up something. We get into the car, and I say, "Hey, Mom, Frankie, what were you doing in there?" And he goes, "Oh, we're just putting something, Band-Aids or something like that." And I look at my mother, and she's like this. This is exactly my mother's behavior. She's on the way, she goes, "Oh, Mom, ¿qué está haciendo Frankie dándole por algo?" And she says, "What were you doing?" As in translation to English, is saying, "Frankie, he goes, Mom, what was Frankie doing in there? We're doing some labor or free labor or something." And he grabs my mom's holding the steering wheel, and she's kind of leaned over like this, like a parent, not paranoid, but like not entirely a comfortable ease driver. And we're driving, and she goes, Mom, ¿qué estaba haciendo? She goes, oh no. And she does it just like that. She goes, oh no. And doesn't say anything. But she does this, like she's driving, we're leaving the house. And the reason that she does this, she goes, oh no. She's doing this like, just keep going. Just forget about it. Just keep going. That's why I wanted to make this video. Because my mother knew. I don't know if the smells, I don't necessarily remember the smells, but I'm going to say this guy was getting oral sex from Frankie. So that's what I have to say about that video. I know he got raped or had oral sex 100%. That I do know, because I heard the same things like when I heard Mikayla in the garage and what that sounded like. So I wanted to say this because my mother knew about it. My mother is moving in forward motions in so many ways. If the mother, I'm not a professional, you dissect me whatever the way you want. If the mother is not able to move forward and like the way that we were trying to survive, you're not gonna. My mother can't get away from the danger. You get raped, just move away from the danger. Get raped again, move away. Just keep moving forward. They'll eventually go away. Oh, it's okay. They'll eventually go away. That's how my mother was. My mother was very much like, oh, it's okay, they'll go away. And my, like, oh, mira, Diana, but Diana's conversating with my mom all the time. 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock. Doesn't know what happened to Frankie. Miguel, same thing. They walk their dog. Skive. This guy was 270 pounds. Keep your dog where we can rape him and keep him in this cage in his room. We're in control of the gay community, and the police department is helping us to rape whatever we want. And that's what happened. All these people knew about it. I was a complete deterring anybody from harming Frankie. I could never express enough what a lookout I was for Frankie. I don't have, I understand that people are born gay. I understand that people, that's what they do. I just don't feel that somebody should be violating you like that when you're an adult, when you're a kid. Like, you're a very young kid. Now, my biological father and my mother had sex, and she was really young. My mom said she told me she was 21, she got pregnant by me. I don't know if that was her real age, but you got to understand, my biological father, that was a consented relationship. I heard them over the phone. I was there. My mom invited him. It was like a booty call, and it was the whole situation. Mikayla, you're probably going to want to know this as well. You got to understand that, that in this particular, I forgot what I was talking about. My mother, since all the people found out about Frankie being raped, they all felt encouraged because my dad was old and because my mom was having kids with another guy, and especially if Hector was also very young. I mean, older, much older. He wasn't much older. He was like 25 years old when he got my mom pregnant. He was in his 20s, early 20s without a doubt. That's what I recall. And he spoke to my dad, and it was a mutual agreement, take care of my kid. And he did. But I think it's important for me to say this because all of them say, oh, you get to have sex with a young one? I'm going to have sex with a young one. It's good influence. You see, you too, huh? Oh, yeah, you too, huh? Oh, yeah, you too. You see that gay one over there too? I'm going to give me some of that too. So Frankie was very much imprisoned. It was very much imprisoned, like in his room, his cage, very much like that. Without a doubt, it was very much like that. So I think it's important, for me to talk about so that you can make your evaluations. You can talk to Frankie about it. My mother, Julian. Julian is going to be a key role to tell you what else happened. Drawing pictures, whatever he can remember. Julian is going to be, if I had talked to Julian and we knew if I had drawn these pictures and I had been confirmed these were all rapes and this is what really was, Julian would have been traumatized, I think, in my opinion. He would have been traumatized very bad because he used to go to the gym with Frankie, and they had a pretty brother. We had a really good relationship when we were all young, and I say this because if he finds out something like that happened to Frankie, I think he would be devastated, in my opinion, without a doubt, obviously because his brother, but I think that he, I think he would feel like I couldn't do enough. That's what I think. Like I couldn't do enough. Like there's nothing I could do about it. Not that he didn't care. It's just like I couldn't do enough. I couldn't do anything about it. Like, and he would feel bad because the whole gay community, what they did and what they covered up. But I think it's important to talk this about my mother. She knew about that. So when I looked at Frankie and I'm in the car and she goes, "Oh," and we're driving away from this incident, I looked at Frankie. My mother was looking at Frankie that my mother knew. Why is this? Frankie then starts to think that, well, my mom doesn't care all that much. You're the professionals. Frankie is in the car. He's sitting directly behind me, and he's looking. He can get a clear shot at my mother. He can get a good clear shot of her face or my mother. So I think it's important. My mother was doing everything that she can. It's a way to just move forward after you're raped. It's just move the kids, say this, you're not going to get anything else. She had to do the same thing when she had to throw her daughter away who had Down syndrome. There's not even a proper burial, none of those things. So if anyone cares or any of these things, you do your research. I'm not the professional. You work your magic. I'm going to keep applying, for Jesus and God and heal whatever things I can do to make things better. And I'll do my best with that. Other than that, I'm not in control. You have to leave it to God and the professionals. I'm just a little guy. I'm just a little storyteller. I really didn't do very much. Nobody will understand other than God. And I think it's important because you'll be able to make a well-rounded figure that if something happened to Frankie and he's in a nursing home or something, you got to understand that what that did of putting those celebrities and Michael Jackson in that picture was a curse more of harm than it was so bad. It's not to say I think it did good because other good people did get involved that were probably gay, that did get involved, that did want to stop and keep at peace and things. If that never would have happened or shown up, could have somebody else been a hero without him? Maybe, but we'll never know. So I think it's important. My father did everything he could. We're so attacked by so many people, and it's the gay community, strictly only the gay community. It ain't nobody else. These are all homosexual men that are our target, all of them. That's all they're doing. The police officers knew, the fire department, we were there, I saw them, I was in the car, we were at the front yard, all the incidents, they all knew about it. They didn't care. They wanted to just let him get away with whatever he wanted, Miguel, whatever. So if Diana and Miguel spilt the beans on everything, they're gonna tell you. What I have to say, if they tell you the truth and everything, they're gonna tell you and say, yeah, the police officers came and harassed us and they knew about it. They were just kind of slapping our hand a little bit. Mickey's also gonna be able to tell you that. So yeah. Hopefully this puts a picture, and my mother knew about it, because the reason way I feel right now is I remember being I remember opening the door for Frankie, or opening the door and I saw Frankie with normal places. It was in his room before watching TV with the remote, and he goes, "Yeah, Mom." And so, I think that he had a part of him that was just like, I don't think this person, even though he knows it's kind of bad and he knows that he may be gay, there's such a mental transfusion, it's very toxic, that he doesn't seem like, he always has to protect my mother and do what she can, but he he knows that she knows, but she can't do anything. So you'd have to talk to him with that relationship with my mother. So, and ask Julian more questions, because Julian's a big part of this. Julian, you'd have to ask him all the questions in the world to get more answers, if it even matters anymore. So if something happened to Frankie and he can't talk anymore at all permanently, that I said some of the things that he went through upon his life, because I think it's going to be important. How many people are trying to cover up still to this very day? This is why I had to surrender my life to Jesus and God and just be obedient. Time ran out. Time ran out. And that was it. That's how nasty and bad this world horrifically is, and how people are huge monsters, greater than you could imagine. Monsters in every way. So many problems everywhere. You know, very awful monster people out there. You just don't think that you can see. You just don't see them sometimes, and it's too late now. And I just wanted to share my honesty, my truth. That is what I have to say about that. It's just my honesty and my truth for the best of everything that goes on in this life. I would never. You don't understand that how well I would. I had no reasons to hide this. This was not a profitable gain. This was not to lie. This was not how everything played out. Is not how I want to make an excuse. I'm being trained and told different every time I ask questions toward my mother and Frankie. I'm the only one, and then I go to my dad for help. That's how it was. That's exactly how it was. My dad was always the brains that I went to for protection, help in this situation. So I hope that this information helps the psychologist and to put stories together, because it is too late. And I feel that if you put the wrong people in life, in this circumstances of life, members of distant family members in the wrong picture and wrong place, it's like I'm going to be talking to the devil. I'm going to be talking to demons and devils, real life demons that, are very evil Nazi soldiers that don't give it, that are lying, very evil, dark, and pretending like they're friends and family and don't understand how much harm their intentions were. But I'm not the professional to dissect that, who was good and who was bad, who gets together, who isn't. You do, if you care. If you don't, then we're worthless to that existence and purposeful to something else. Hope that helps. Got my work on these model ships. I got my crucifix, but forgive me for my sins, Father, the Mother, the Holy Spirit. I got the crucifix, and I'm not perfect. A lot of people, but I hope this information helps. I did my best. Love you, Frankie. You have no idea how much I care for you, even though we used to argue and fight occasionally. We were just kids and Julian. You have no idea what I had done in my life. Like my mother used to tell me growing up, in this lifetime, I am never going to be rewarded for what I had done. And in this lifetime, I was the same exactly like my mother. In this lifetime, I was never going to be rewarded for the things that I had done. We're too late to be rewarded in life. To try to make a family peaceful and protected, and the work and labor, the things that I had done. And I have to lead up to God and to what the orders are coming from the psychologists and the devices they're using on me. You have no idea what's happening on that other retrospective playing field. But I hope the best. Take care. Love you.